This story is a fictional narrative inspired by real-life emotions and everyday experiences. Joseph knew that 15 kilograms of missing rubber would cost him something. He just didn't expect the price to be paid in millimeters of flesh and bone, under the new overseer's blade. This was the Congo in the 1950s. Joseph Ikonde was a rubber tapper. He'd seen men have their hands cut off on the plantation before, but today a new rule was being made. It wasn't just a punishment for laziness anymore. Now it was a model calculation for failing against nature. When a blight killed 50 trees in his section, those 15 missing kilos of rubber weren't just a number on paper anymore. It was a death sentence. And the one who would witness that sentence was Kofi, his 8-year-old son, hiding behind the loose door of their hut. The sound of the boots was gone, but the fear was still there, thick in the air like the smell of fresh blood. I was curled up behind a rotting wooden door, my palms pressed against my ears. But it was no use. Those sounds still came through, the crack of a whip, the growling shouts of the white men in a language I didn't understand. And then a scream. A short, choked-off scream, like it was strangled in the throat. It didn't sound like my father. My father never cried out, and yet I knew, I was sure, it was him. Then silence. A silence more terrifying than the noise. I didn't dare breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest like it wanted to break through my ribs. Through a crack in the door, I could only see a patch of red dirt yard and the shadows of soldiers in khaki disappearing behind the trees. They were gone. But where was Father? I inched my way out of my hiding spot. My knees were shaking, unsteady. I crawled into the middle of the room and looked out into the front yard, and I saw him. Father was lying face down on the ground. His right arm was stretched out in front of him, but from the elbow down, it was gone. Just a dirty bundle of cloth wrapped hastily around it. And a dark, wet, red stain spreading on the dirt, soaking into the sand like a cruel, tiny rain. Father wasn't moving. His face was pressed into the earth. I thought of trapped birds I'd seen in the forest, lying just as still. Dad? My voice was smaller than a mosquito's hum. My throat was dry, choked. Then I saw the fingers on his left hand twitch. Very lightly. His left hand began to crawl slowly on the ground, the fingers clawing at the dirt, searching for something to hold. His whole huge, strong body began to stir. He didn't use his right arm. He put all his strength into his left arm, trying to lift his upper body. His head slowly rose. He turned his face toward the house. His eyes were open, but they looked distant, cloudy. His face was pale, covered in sweat and dirt. His lips moved. I wanted to run out, but my legs were nailed to the floor. I was scared. I was scared of that red stuff, scared of his still body, scared of my own weakness. Father seemed to see me. Those cloudy eyes suddenly stopped on the darkness in the doorway where I was standing. Something flashed in them, not pain, but a different kind of panic. He shook his head very slightly. His lips moved again, and this time I guessed the words, "Don't come out." Then he started to move, not to stand up. He dragged himself. Using his left elbow and his knees, he crawled toward a corner of the yard where the rubber sap basket from this morning lay knocked over on its side. Some of the white, milky sap had spilled out, smeared on the ground. Every time he moved an inch, the blood on his right arm seemed to spread more. He didn't moan. All I heard was his wheezing, heavy breath mixed with the sound of his clothes scraping the dirt. He reached the basket. He sat up, panting. Then he did something that made my breath stop. He used his left arm to hug the side of the basket, and he placed the shortened bandaged stump of his right forearm, where the cloth was soaked with blood, on the basket's rim. He used that wounded, painful flesh as a lever, clamping the basket tight against his body. He tried to stand. His legs trembled like reeds in the wind. He fell down once, his knee hitting the ground with a thump. He struggled up again. This time he didn't try to carry the basket. He hugged it and he dragged himself. He dragged his heavy steps toward the house. The heavy sap basket scraped along the ground, leaving a white, milky trail mixed with red dirt. But behind him, from where he had lain to the doorstep, was another trail, a longer, darker streak. It was his blood seeping from the cloth on his arm, dripping without stopping. Two trails, one white sap, one red blood, side by side, like a strange, twisted road leading to our little house. I stepped back to make way. Father dragged himself over the threshold, breathing hard like an ox pulling a heavy load. He pulled the sap basket all the way into a corner and propped it up. Then he turned to look at me. His whole body was soaked in sweat and blood, his clothes covered in dirt. But his eyes were clearer now, though full of exhaustion and pain. He opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse, small like wind through leaves. "Don't be afraid." He took one step toward me, then two. "It's over." On the third step, his eyes closed. His whole tall body, like a great tree cut down, crashed to the ground right in front of me. "I'm still here." Those last words came out as he lay motionless again, face pressed to the ground, right at the feet of his cowardly son. I woke up feeling empty-headed, like I'd just swum through a long, dark dream. Then the smell hit me. Not the usual damp morning smell of earth. It was a sweet, heavy, sickly smell mixed with the cold scent of a dead cooking fire. The smell of dried blood. Morning light came through the cracks in the wooden wall, shining right onto a dark stain on the floor. There, green flies were swarming, crowding over something I didn't dare look at closely. My body was stiff. Last night was not a nightmare. A moan. It came from the bamboo bed. A weak, broken moan like a thread about to snap. Father. He lay there, his face paler than the white cloth my mother used to wear. His lips were dry, cracked, and his right arm, oh God, his right arm. From the elbow down, it was just a bundle of torn cloth wrapped in a hurry. But that cloth wasn't white anymore. It was soaked with a dark brown color, wet and sticky, and every time Father breathed out, a new damp spot would spread, darker than before. I stood frozen, my limbs shaking. My eyes slid to the corner of the room. The sap basket was still there. It lay in the middle of the floor, huge and black, like a devil grinning. That thing. A small voice in my head screamed, "Do something! You have to save him!" I stumbled to the water jar and scooped out a gourdful. My hand shook so much, more water spilled outside than into the bowl. I took the oldest rag, wet it, and crept to the bed. I didn't dare touch that bundle of cloth. I just dared to bring the wet cloth to wipe over his cracked lips. My hand touched his face. It was hot as fire. Father's eyes slowly opened. They were cloudy, like a fog had settled over them. He looked around the room, his gaze lost, then finally stopped on my face. He wanted to say something, his throat moved, but all that came out was a choked, dry moan. "Dad," I whispered, tears starting to fall without me knowing. Knock, knock, knock. Someone at the door. My heart seemed to stop. Was it them? Had they come back to take the other arm, or to take me? My feet were rooted to the floor. I didn't dare breathe. "Kofi, open the door, son." A familiar, raspy voice. Not a soldier's voice. I crept over and slid the bolt. Old Malik stepped inside. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at the bed where my father lay. He let out a long, heavy sigh. Over his own left shoulder, his shirt sleeve was also sewn shut, hanging empty. "Another one," he muttered, his voice full of a tiredness that wasn't sadness anymore, just acceptance. He told me to boil water, a lot of it, really hot. While I clumsily lit the fire, he sat down next to my father. I turned around and saw him carefully unwrapping the dirty bandages, layer by layer. The dried blood was stuck fast, and he used the warm water I'd boiled to soften it. Then I saw it. Where my father's arm used to be was now a stump, purple, crushed, ragged flesh. And in the middle, a short, stark white piece of bone stuck out. A strong, coppery smell rushed up. My stomach twisted, my throat clenched with bitterness. I turned my face away, hands over my mouth. "Look, Kofi." Old Malik's voice was steady, without emotion. "Look and get used to it. You'll see more later." He paused, looking at me. "Do you know why your father is lying here?" I shook my head, tears streaming. "It's not because he was lazy. Your father was one of the hardest workers, and not really because of a lack of sap, either." He pointed to the basket. "It's because of a calculation, son, a devil's calculation. He started to explain like reciting a story he knew by heart. My father was in charge of 200 trees. The quota was based on those 200 trees. But this year, disease killed 50 trees. They couldn't give a single drop of sap. My father worked himself to the bone on the 150 trees left. But how could it be enough? It still fell short by exactly 15 kilos. Those 15 kilos, old Malik lifted his own stump, then pointed at my father. They called that an example. The new foreman, that bloodthirsty one, wanted to make an example of your father for the whole village. He said, if you can't manage your trees, then you don't need all your limbs either. A chill went down my spine. It wasn't a burst of anger. It was a calculation. Cold, clear. The dead trees, the numbers, the scale. They all together sentenced my father. That kind of systematic cruelty scared me more than any single slash of a knife. Old Malik took a small packet from his bag, some light brown powder and a lump of something dark, sticky, and gummy. Uncured rubber. This isn't to heal, Kofi, he added, mixing them with the hot water in a bowl. The mixture became a thick black paste, giving off a sharp, bitter smell. This is to seal, like plugging a leaking bottle. It traps the death inside, stretches out the pain, and hopes the body is strong enough to survive or to die. He told me to come closer. Hold your father tight. I knelt down, my small hands pressing on my father's chest. His skin was burning. Old Malik took the bowl of black paste and tilted it. When that hot, sticky liquid touched the crushed raw flesh of the stump, my father jerked up. A howl. Not a moan. A raw, primal scream that tore through the silence, coming from the bottom of his lungs, filled with such pure agony, it shocked all his fading senses awake. His eyes flew open, staring right at me, filled with an ocean of horror and painful awareness. Hold him, old Malik shouted. I pushed down with all my strength, tears flowing, my hands on my father's chest. I could feel violent shudders running through his body like a panicked animal was thrashing his side on him. Old Malik worked quickly, smearing, spreading, using a cleaner piece of cloth to press the thick black paste onto the wound, covering it completely. For the first time, I didn't witness my father's pain from behind a door. I touched it. I held it down. And that pain, through the shudders of his body, passed into me, making my own bones feel like they might shatter. When it was done, old Malik let go. My father gasped for air, sweat drenching him, then his head fell to the side, eyes tightly shut. But he was still breathing. The wound was now covered by a black, shiny, strange crust, like a piece of jewelry from hell. Then the fever came. My father started to rave. He didn't recognize anyone. Broken, fragmented words poured from his mouth. Don't go near the boy. His voice full of terror, his left hand grasping at the air. He's innocent. Take me instead. Then his voice turned to pleading, desperate. 50 trees, all dead. I can't. Don't count them. Don't count them. And finally, a clear, furious sentence, like a curse sent to invisible men. 15 kilos, 1 arm. You do the math. Keep calculating. My life. How many kilos is that worth? I sat down hard on the floor, holding my head. The numbers, 50 trees, 15 kilos, had become living demons. They danced in my head, biting, gnawing at the image of my father writhing on the bed. I understood now. That cut wasn't the end. It opened a new trial. A trial calculated in pain that would last forever. The next morning, when sunlight came through the wall again, my father's fever had broken. He woke up. His eyes opened, the fog a little clearer, but filled with utter exhaustion. He turned his head slowly. He saw I'd fallen asleep on the dirt floor next to the bed. My small hands, covered in scratches from when the firewood sparked or from who knows when, were now caked with dried, hardened bits of rubber sap. Its brown-black color was stuck under my nails, on the back of my hands, like a strange tattoo, exactly the color of the wound on my father's arm. My father reached out his left hand. That hand was trembling, the fingers bony. He gently touched the back of my hand, where a thick patch of the black sap was caked. A hot tear rolled from the corner of his eye. It landed right where he had just touched. The clear tear wet a tiny spot, revealing a patch of my own tender pink skin underneath just for a second. Then the bitter, hard, dry sap slowly soaked up the moisture and covered it again. He whispered, his voice thick and hoarse, not really talking to me, but to the numbers, the invisible calculations that had tortured him. 1 arm, you have taken. His breath was heavy. But it does not set the price for this boy. And in those eyes, clouded by pain and exhaustion, for the first time, I saw something strange. Not surrender or the resigned look I was used to, but a spark. A cold, smoldering spark, the kind that can only be lit from the ashes of an unfair calculation. The spark of a new kind of will. 4 years passed. The sharp pain of seeing my father's stump never went away. But it became part of the air, like the heat or the dampness. It became normal. My new normal started before sunrise, when dew still sat in the V-shaped cuts on the tree trunks. I was 12, and my job was to follow my father, collecting the little ceramic cups of white, congealed sap, and emptying them into the huge basket always strapped to his back. By now, Father was used to having only one hand. He used an old rope, one end tied to the basket handle, the other looped over his right shoulder and tied tight to the stump of his arm. The basket was like a parasite stuck to his body. And I witnessed a normal every day. Like the time Uncle Bemba, who tapped the trees in the next plot, suddenly collapsed. He lay still under a tree, eyes closed, sweat pouring off him like he'd been in a bath. Everyone stopped and looked. Then a black soldier, his uniform torn at the shoulder, came on his rounds. He didn't ask what was wrong. He used his long iron prod. The thing used to tap trees to make the sap flow faster, and jabbed it hard into Uncle Bemba's side. "Get up, lazy are you?" his voice shrill. Uncle Bemba jolted, opened his eyes, frantically searching for his tapping knife, which had fallen beside him. The soldier kicked him in the hip. "Hurry up! The quota won't wait for you!" Uncle Bemba clumsily got up, trembling, and picked up his knife to keep working. Nobody said a word. My father bent down, kept pouring sap from a cup into the basket, his face showing nothing. His left hand gripped the edge of the basket, his knuckles white. That was normal. People could fall, could die right here, and the only thing that mattered was the next drop of sap. Then there was Nala, a worker's wife, clearly pregnant. She was given the job of stirring the vats of liquid sap so it wouldn't coagulate. One noon, maybe from dizziness, she knocked over a vat. The stream of white sap spilled onto the ground, soaking quickly into the dry leaves. The Belgian foreman, not the one who'd cut my father's hand, that one had been transferred, walked over. He didn't hit her. He just pointed at the sap-slick ground. "Kneel," he said, his voice calm. "Kneel here until the sun dries this up. So you remember." Nala trembled, her pregnant belly heavy, and slowly knelt down. The ground was hot and sticky. The midday sun burned her hair and her thin back. I saw the sweat soak through her shirt, saw her hands cradling her belly. My father pulled my hand, dragging me onto the next tree. "Don't look too long," he whispered, his voice tense. "Look too long, and he'll notice." "But she—" "Quiet," he interrupted. His voice wasn't angry, but full of exhaustion. "Be quiet and do your job." I was quiet, but the image of Nala kneeling in the sun in her own spilled sap haunted me. That was normal, too. Punishment didn't need a prod or a knife. Just an order, and the sun would do the rest. Then one day, normal brought something even more terrifying. There was a rumor that Ochi, a young, strong worker, had run away into the forest the night before. The whole plantation was buzzing. The next morning, when my father and I got to our work area, we saw a crowd gathered in the clearing in front of the foreman's hut. In the middle of the crowd, a boy. He was about my age, maybe younger. His clothes were torn, his face dusty. He was tied tight to a wooden pole set up in the open, his arms raised high and wrapped around it. He wasn't crying. He just stood there, eyes wide open, staring into nothing, like he didn't understand what was happening. The Belgian foreman stood in front of the boy, holding a cigarette. "This is Ochi's son," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, in the broken local language I understood. His father thought he could run, but blood cannot run away. He blew out a puff of smoke, looking around at the crowd of silent, frightened faces. "He will stay here until his father returns and pays the penalty for running away. No food, no water. So all of you know." He paused, his cold eyes sweeping over everyone. "The sin of the parent the child must bear. That is the law here." My heart seemed to stop. I looked at that boy. He was just like me, just a kid, just because his father. I turned to look at my father. His face had gone pale. His left hand was gripping the rope tied to the basket so tight I heard it creak. The stump of his right arm, where the other end of the rope was tied, seemed to strain too. Did he realize that the tied-up boy could have been me? That if he did something wrong, that wooden pole, those ropes, would be for me? I wanted to run over, to demand he let the boy go. A hot fury rose in my chest. But my feet were nailed to the ground again. I looked at my father, and my father wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, his face becoming blank like a wooden mask. Then he turned around. His left hand let go of the basket rope and grabbed my arm. The pull was strong. "Come," he said, his voice dry. "But Dad, come on!" His voice was heavy with a command I'd never heard before. He dragged me away, pulling me out of the crowd toward the rows of rubber trees. I looked back. The boy was still there, tied up, small and alone in the vast clearing. "Don't look," my father said, his voice trembling. "Remember it. Remember all of it. But don't look right now. Turn your face away." I turned my face away. Tears spilled out, hot, but I didn't dare make a sound. Father kept pulling me along. His steps were fast, urgent. He didn't dare look back. All that day, the image of the tied-up boy haunted me. The foreman's words echoed in my ears. "The sin of the parent, the child must bear." I watched my father, diligently using his left hand and his right stump to clutch the heavy basket. He worked harder than any other day, as if he wanted to bury his thoughts in every movement. That night, in our dark hut, I lay curled up on my mat. The anger from the day had turned into a cold, deep fear that seeped into my bones. I was afraid for that boy, and I was afraid for myself. My father sat on a rotten wooden stool, silent. The flickering firelight played on his old, weary face. A long time later, he finally spoke, his voice raspy, tearing the silence. "I know what you wanted to do today." I didn't dare answer. "I wanted to, too." He paused, his breath heavy. "I wanted to charge over there, cut the ropes, give him a piece of bread, a gourd of water. I wanted to... more than anything." He looked down at his own hands, one calloused hand and one short, bruised stump. "But I didn't." His voice choked. "I couldn't save him. I didn't even dare give him a drop of water because..." He looked up at me, his eyes a sea of pain and shame. "Because I still have you." Those words were like knives, stabbing straight into my chest. It wasn't a scolding. It was a confession. A truth that hurt my father more than the stump from years ago. To protect me, he had to become a coward. He had to turn his back on a child who needed help. And he would have to do it again, many times. I didn't know what to say. I just lay there, listening to my father's ragged breath. And from far away in the still night, it seemed like I could hear the weak, frightened cry of a child carried on the wind from the direction of the clearing. It kept echoing into my sleep, into my fear, into the cruel truth I had just learned. The first lesson of survival in this place is to be silent and to turn away. Even when your heart wants to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The rumor came like a gentle breeze, winding through the rubber trees, whispering into the ears of the bent-over workers. At first, it was just winks, a tiny nod between two workers when the soldiers passed. Then came the words passed from mouth to mouth, fast as wildfire. When we took a break under a big tree, I heard up at the northern plantation. They stood up. "Who says?" "A truck driver hauling sap said so. They burned 2 storage sheds, and some of our soldiers joined them." "Our soldiers? The ones in uniform?" "Yeah, I heard they're sick of beating their own people, too." I sat next to my father, listening. Something in my chest began to tremble, not fear, but a strange, warm feeling. Hope. It was fragile as a spiderweb, but it was real. My father didn't say anything. He just sat there, slowly chewing a piece of dried cassava, his eyes gazing far off toward the soldiers' wooden barracks. But I saw his thumb rubbing back and forth on his left palm over and over. Then one night, it happened. I was lying awake when I smelled smoke. Not cooking fire smoke. It was the smell of burning wood, sharp, mixed with the smell of rubber, heating up. A sickly sweet smell. I sat up and ran to the door. Far off, toward the storage sheds, a bright orange fire was rising against the black night. It wasn't huge, but it was burning. Alarm bells clanged from the soldiers' post. The sound of running feet, shouts in Belgian echoed. Flashlight beams cut through the dark. My father stood beside me, a hand on my shoulder. His grip was tight. "Go inside," he whispered, but his voice wasn't its usual fear. It had a different kind of tension. "Go in and don't come out again." I went in, but stood behind the door, peeking through a crack. I saw the local soldiers run past. Their faces in the distant firelight no longer looked bored or cruel. I saw hesitation. One even turned to look toward the village huts, his eyes complicated before a shout in Belgian urged him on. The fire was put out before dawn, but it had burned. It left a black mark on the sky and in everyone's hearts. Who did it? No one knew. No one talked. But the next morning, when we went to the fields, the air was different. The fear was still there, but it was pushed aside by something quieter, stronger, a united silence. People didn't bow their heads when soldiers passed anymore. They looked up, met their gaze, then bent back to work. A silent challenge. And the rulers felt it. Their reaction was quick and more brutal. White soldiers, their faces irritable, patrolled with their hands always on their rifle triggers. They raided nearby villages in the dead of night, taking any young man who looked strong on the vague charge of suspected sabotage. The crying of mothers, the pleading of wives, filled the night again, replacing the alarm bells. The air was as tight as a bowstring. We knew we were being watched in every move. My father became quieter than ever. He was like a shadow, go to work, come home, eat, and always listening. Listening for footsteps outside, for whispers in the village. Then one afternoon, when the sun cast long shadows, 2 black soldiers appeared at our door. "Joseph, to the post. The boss wants you." My father was sitting, fixing the rope for his basket. He looked up, his face showing no surprise. He nodded and slowly stood. He gave me one quick look, a message I couldn't catch in time. Stay calm. Stay here. I stood up, meaning to follow. One soldier blocked me. Just him. My father walked away between the 2 soldiers, his shadow long on the ground, the empty sap basket swinging at his side. I watched until they disappeared behind the rows of buildings. My heart pounded. I didn't know what to do. I just sat on the doorstep, hugged my knees, and waited. Time passed as slow as rubber sap coagulating. As darkness began to fall, my father still wasn't back. Then I heard footsteps. More footsteps. My father came back, but not alone. With him was the white officer, the new replacement, a cold-faced young man full of arrogant confidence. He wasn't in full uniform, just an off-white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He walked into our hut like it was empty, his eyes sweeping over our poor shack with contempt. My father stood to the side, head slightly bowed. "Joseph," the officer said in the broken local language he thought we understood, "you've been here a long time. You know everyone." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and opened it. On it was a handwritten list, scribbled. "These names," he pointed, "they have bad attitudes, they resist. Malik." He read a name that made my heart clench, Old Malik. Then other names, all quiet, respected men from the village. "You know them. Point them out. Who's the leader? Who burned the shed?" My father was silent. He looked at the dirt floor. "Point them out," the officer repeated, his voice softer now, full of mockery. "And you will be treated well. Maybe a lower quota for you." He paused, stepping closer to my father, and otherwise... He didn't finish. Instead, he turned his head, and his cold eyes swept the room and landed on me. I was leaning against the wall, my whole body frozen. His gaze was like an icy knife scraping over me. "Otherwise," he said, turning back to my father, his voice low and clear, "the consequences won't be just for you." The threat was plain as day. The room was dead silent. I could hear my own ragged breath. My father slowly lifted his face. He looked at the officer, and then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw a fierce battle, fear, fury, and a love so big it hurt. Then he looked back at the officer. Slowly, very slowly, my father shook his head. A small shake, but definite. The officer's face flashed surprise, then was quickly replaced by cold anger. He gave a tight, joyless smile. "Fine," he said, his voice going shrill. "Very good. Solidarity." He turned to the 2 soldiers at the door and signaled, "Keep the boy." Before I understood what was happening, 2 big, rough hands grabbed my arms. A squeeze that hurt like fire. "No!" my father roared, a cry from the depths of his soul, full of despair. He lunged toward me, his left hand reaching out to grab me back. Another soldier, standing nearby, raised his foot and kicked my father hard in the side. Thump! A sickening sound. My father crumpled, gasping, clutching his side. "Put him to work in the post, cleaning, running errands," the officer ordered. His eyes not leaving my father curled on the ground. Give his father more time to think. I struggled, but it was useless. They dragged me out the door. I looked back, and through my blurred, panicked tears, I saw my father trying to crawl up, his mouth open. "My son!" His cry tore through the falling darkness, filled with a pain I'd never heard before. Once again, I was pulled away from my father. But this time, there was no door to hide behind, no darkness to crouch in. This time, I was dragged straight into the belly of the beast, into prison. The room was smaller than my hut. It smelled of mold, urine, and fear. There were 5 of us. I was the oldest. The youngest was only about 6, his face dirty, clutching his knees and sniffling all day. No one comforted him. Each of us had our own private fear gnawing at us from inside. The soldiers called us walking spare parts. Our job was to sweep the post's yard, clean the tables and chairs in the white soldiers' rooms, wash their stinking chamber pots, and run to fetch water and firewood. Beatings were normal. A slap for not sweeping clean, a kick for running too slow. Once, the 6-year-old spilled a bucket of water. The guard, a big black man, grabbed him by the collar and threatened to dunk his head in the bucket. "Next time, I'll let you drink it all," he laughed, showing gold teeth. Then he threw the boy down and looked at me, as if I was the oldest and responsible. "I could kill any one of you like a rat, and your parents will know why." That threat was colder than any kick. It wasn't just aimed at us. It was aimed at the hearts beating out there. I understood then. We weren't just hostages. We were knives held to our own family's throats. But they had a more clever way to torture us. Our prison room had a small window at eye level if I stood on a rock in the corner. From there, I could see part of the clearing in front of the post. And I saw my father. They made him work there. Hard, pointless work. Moving rocks from one pile to another, digging holes only to fill them back in. And he had to do it with one hand. I saw the huge sap basket still strapped to him, now full of rocks. The rope rubbed against his stump. I could imagine how raw and sore it was. But physical pain wasn't the real goal. One soldier had a special job, to watch my father. And every single time he saw my father stop, look up, and search for the tiny window where I stood. Shove! A push, a jab with a rifle butt. My father would pitch forward, face hitting the dusty ground. The first time I saw it, I screamed and beat my hands on the iron bars. The guard inside the room yanked me down and slapped me hard across the face. "Quiet! You want your old man beat more?" I went quiet. Tears streamed down, but I was silent. I learned to only peek, for a second, and I saw that after every time he was knocked down, my father would slowly get up, dust himself off, and never look up again. He kept his head down, focused only on the rock, the shovel, as if that was his whole world. They were breaking him, using me as the hammer. In that dark prison room, there was one small light, a girl. Her name was Ilara, about 10 years old, skinny but with huge bright eyes like 2 hot coals in the dark. Her father was a captured rebel leader from another plantation, brought here for questioning. Ilara was taken as a hostage, like me. She didn't cry. She also didn't seem to tremble much. One night, when the other kids had fallen asleep from exhaustion and hunger, Ilara crawled over to me. "You're Kofi, right?" she whispered, her voice small but clear. I nodded. "Your father lost his arm when you were 8. I flinched. "How do you know?" "I heard the soldiers talking. They tell it like a funny story," Ilara said without emotion. "My father was tortured too, but he never said a word." I looked at her. In the dark, her eyes shone with a strange belief. "Why did they take us?" I asked, my voice bitter. "We're just kids." Ilara shook her head. "No, they took us because they're afraid." "Afraid? Afraid of kids?" "Afraid of what we'll remember." The girl spoke as if repeating someone's words. "My father says they can burn villages, kill people, cut off hands, but they can't erase memory. Every kid in here," she pointed at the sleeping children, "will carry this picture, this shame, and one day that memory will grow up. It will become a weapon. They know that. So they try to break us while we're small." Ilara's words were like a tiny flame blown to life in my chest. Memory is a weapon. I looked down at my own hands. I remembered everything, and I swore I would never forget. Then the fateful day came. We were being herded into the yard to sweep when we saw the white officer step out of the main building. He walked straight to our prison room. And behind him was my father. My father looked like a walking corpse. His clothes were torn and filthy. One cheek was swollen and bruised. He walked with a limp. But what froze my heart was his eyes. They were empty, lifeless, as if his soul had been drained. The officer stopped in front of our cell. He signaled. The guard opened the door, stepped in, his eyes sweeping over the kids cowering in the corner before landing on me. A big hand grabbed my shirt and hauled me outside. "Stand here," the officer ordered. I stood there, trembling, between my father and him. My father looked at me, a flash of pain breaking through the emptiness in his eyes. Then it quickly died. The officer turned to my father. "Joseph, last chance." His voice was soft, fake. "The list." Just one nod. He raised his hand and pointed straight at my face. "One nod, and your son goes home right now, clean, unharmed." He paused, letting the tension hang in the air like a string about to snap. "Otherwise—" He didn't finish. Instead, he slowly pulled something from the holster on his belt, a small black pistol, shiny in the sun. My heart seemed to stop. All sound vanished. All I heard was the blood rushing in my ears. He raised the pistol, slowly. The black, cold barrel pointed right at me. Then it moved, pressed against my temple. The feeling of cold metal against my skin made my whole body flinch. "Otherwise," the officer said, his voice a threatening whisper, "it will be an expensive lesson for both father and son." I couldn't breathe. I looked at my father. My eyes were wide, but strangely, there were no tears this time. Maybe I was all dried up. I just looked. My father looked at me. He looked at the gun pressed to his son's temple. Then he looked down at the ground. His body shook with tremors he couldn't control. His face twisted as if he was in physical pain worse than any knife. A long time, a very long time. Then slowly, very slowly, my father nodded. A slight nod, almost unnoticeable, but it was like a hammer smashing everything to pieces. The officer smiled slightly, a cruel, victorious smile. He lowered the gun. My father lifted his face. He didn't look at the officer, he looked at me. And in those eyes, full of water, shame, and pain, I didn't see the fear I'd seen when he lost his arm. I saw something else, a cold acceptance. A decision that had been weighed, was painful, and was brutal. His voice was hoarse, broken, but clear in every word. "All right." He took a deep breath as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "I'll talk. You're listening to Inner Echo Stories channel. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories." They let us go, just like that. After my father said, "I'll talk," the officer nodded, pleased, and ordered them to release me. No explanation, no other promises. I was shoved toward my father, and we were allowed to walk home, under the soldiers' watchful eyes. But the home we returned to wasn't a home anymore. It was another cage. My father became no longer my father. He was terrifyingly silent. Before, his silence was a rock, heavy with pain. Now it was a wall of ice, smooth and cold. He worked, ate, slept like a machine. His eyes didn't look at me with love or worry anymore. They looked right through me, or at some empty spot behind my head. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his own left hand as if he didn't recognize whose it was. And the village treated him like he had a disease. When we walked by, people turned their backs. Chatter stopped. The looks weren't of sympathy or shared pain anymore, but of disgust, fear, and cruel curiosity. They believed my father had pointed fingers, that he'd sold out friends and neighbors to save his own skin and his son's. "Traitor Joseph," I heard the whispers behind our backs. Old Malik, his old friend who had saved him, never visited again. Once I saw him from a distance. My father started to raise a hand in greeting. Old Malik looked right past him, his face cold as stone, and turned away. That look was like a knife. My father slowly lowered his hand, his face expressionless, as if he'd expected it. I was haunted too, not by the village's contempt, but by the look in my father's eyes at the moment he nodded. That cold, calculating stare kept coming back in my sleep. I didn't understand. How could he? How could him betray people like old Malik? But a part of me, the part that had survived the prison days, whispered, "He did it to save you. Only for you." Then my father started doing strange things. He began to wander at night. The first time I noticed, I woke to the soft sound of the door. I peeked through a wall crack and saw his shadow slip outside and vanish into the night. My heart raced. Where was he going? To meet the soldiers and tell them more, or to do something even worse? But the next night, he went again, and the night after that. With the instinct of a child who'd learned to survive by watching and fearing, I started to see a pattern. My father wasn't wandering aimlessly. He had a purpose. I secretly followed him, from very far, my heart pounding, and saw he wasn't going toward the soldiers' post. He walked around it. He would sit for hours in thick bushes, watching the oil lamps inside the post. He watched the patrols, what route they took, How long before they returned to a spot? He stared at the big tin storage shed where I'd seen them carrying heavy crates, the ammo shed, and he stared at the barbed wire fence behind the post, where there was a small, almost hidden path, covered by overgrown plants. My father wasn't crazy. He was scouting. This realization stunned me. It turned everything I thought about that cold look upside down. Was it all an act? A fake surrender to fool them so he could do something bigger? A small, dangerous hope began to kindle inside me. But I didn't dare ask. Because if I asked, and if anyone overheard, it would all fall apart. Then one night, under a sliver of moon, the sky black as ink, my father woke me. He put a finger to my lips. His eyes in the dark weren't lifeless anymore. They were sharp, tense, and full of purpose. He didn't speak. He just handed me a small, long piece of bamboo, sealed at both ends with beeswax. He leaned close to my ear, his breath warm, his voice a rushed whisper. Take this to the big old banyan tree, where I sit to watch the post. Bury it right under the rock with the Y-shaped crack. Fast, don't let anyone see. He gripped my shoulder. Listen to me. Bury it and come straight back. Don't look at anyone. Don't talk to anyone. Not even me. Understand? I nodded, my hands shaking as I took the bamboo tube. It was light as a feather, but it felt heavy as 1,000 stones. This was a secret. This was my father's life. Both of our lives. Go, my father ordered, his voice dry. I slipped out the door, silent as a cat, and plunged into the night. My heart hammered, every little sound. The crickets' dry leaves rustling made me jump. I ran, bare feet on soft earth, toward the old banyan tree at the village edge, near the forest. The banyan tree was massive, its roots rising like giant snakes. I found the rock with the Y-shaped crack. I knelt and dug into the soft dirt underneath with my hands. The earth was cold and damp. I placed the bamboo tube down, covered it, patted it flat with my hands. Done. I stood up, dusted my hands, a strange feeling spreading, half fear, half excitement. I had done it. I was part of something bigger than myself. I turned, ready to run back. Then a figure stepped out from behind the tree trunk. A soldier. Not a white soldier. A black patrol soldier, holding a long stick. The flashlight from his hand shone right into my face, blinding me. Hey, kid. His voice was shrill, suspicious. Where are you going this late? What are you sneaking around for here? The blood in my veins froze. My limbs went numb. He came closer. The flashlight beam swept over the rock, where the freshly turned dirt was clearly visible. What did you bury? His voice turned dangerous. He stepped forward, one hand reaching out to grab me. I backed up, my back hitting the rough tree bark. No way to run. My mouth was dry and bitter. I was about to ruin everything. I was about to get my father killed. And in that desperate moment, from the thick darkness behind the soldier, another shadow silently appeared. It was my father. He stepped out without a sound, like a tiger. In his left hand, he held a heavy piece of wood, as thick as a wrist, one end sharpened to a point. The soldier still didn't know. He was still staring right at me. My father moved in, step by slow, sure step. His eyes in the darkness weren't on me. They were fixed on the back of the soldier's neck. This time I understood. This time he wouldn't leave me alone. Everything happened in a dizzying blur. My father didn't yell, didn't give a warning. He lunged like an animal, foot driving into the ground. All the strength of a man who'd carried heavy sap baskets his whole life focused into one arm. The sharpened wood slammed into the back of the soldier's neck with a short, dull thud. The soldier jolted. The flashlight fell to the ground and went out. He let out a choked sound. His big body sagged, then collapsed like a sack. No cry. Just a final, rattling hiss of air between his teeth. I stood rooted, eyes wide, not believing what I'd just seen. My father, who had endured, bowed his head, nodded in surrender, was now standing over a soldier, breathing hard, still gripping the wood stained with something dark. He turned to look at me. In the faint moonlight, his face showed no regret or panic. It was cold, decisive, like a stone mask. Come here, he commanded, his voice raspy, but steady. Help me. I stepped forward, my legs shaking like leaves. Together, we dragged the heavy body into a nearby thick bush. My father covered it with leaves and dry branches. His actions were quick, efficient. This wasn't his first time. When it was done, he turned and placed both hands on my shoulders. His left hand was still warm, still trembling slightly. Listen to me, Kofi. And remember, he looked deep into my eyes. Last time, when they cut off my arm, I stayed silent. I looked away. I let everyone think I was a coward. I did that to save you, only to save you. He squeezed my shoulders. But this time, I have to act. Not just to save you, but to save this whole village, to save the children who will never have to go through what you did. My shame these past days, it was necessary. I had to make them believe I was completely broken, that I was just a hungry dog, ready to bite its own kind for a scrap. They believe it now. They won't be watching me. His words were like cold stones hitting my face, waking me from a daze. All of it was a plan. The shameful nod with a gun to my head, the empty stare, the village shunning him. He knew and accepted it. "Dad," I whispered and my voice choked. "The list I gave them," he continued, his voice lower, "it was all names of cruel men, or people who died long ago. I didn't betray anyone, I just cleared the path." He bent down and picked up the empty bamboo tube the soldier had dropped. "The paper you just buried, that was the information I gathered. Guard schedules, how many men per shift, the ammo shed location, the secret ways in and out. Someone has already taken it. They were waiting for the signal." Who is it?" "People like us, Kofi. People who have had enough." His eyes lit with a strange fire. "I got in touch with them. The rebels. The attack is happening. On the night of the new moon, when the dark is thickest." My heart hammered, not from fear now, but from a new burning emotion, the hope of fighting back. "And you," my father said gravely, "have a very important job for you. More important than carrying a piece of wood or a knife." He pulled a small black iron key from inside his shirt. "This is the key to the west storage shed, near the horse stable, where they keep the remaining women and children as hostages. When you hear the first loud sound, a whistle or a big shout, you run as fast as you can there. Unlock it. Lead them out. Then run into the forest. Follow the path marked with the white cloth strips I tied on the trees. Run deep to the mountain stream gully. Hide there. Don't come back until everything is quiet." He pressed the cold key into my hand. "Do you understand? Their lives are in your hands. You are the fastest runner. You are the one they'll trust when they see the key." I gripped the key, its sharp edges biting into my palm. I nodded firmly. "I understand." My father looked at me for a long time. Then he opened his arms. He hugged me, a hug so tight, so warm, completely different from the desperate hug years ago. His warmth, the smell of sweat and earth, of rubber sap, it all washed over me. He didn't whisper, "Remember to live," like last time. He said, his voice deep and warm, full of the weight of an order and a trust, "Remember to live, Kofi. And remember, don't let anyone, any child, ever go through what your father did. Have to live in fear of losing a part of their body or a part of their soul. You can do this." Tears streamed down my face, hot, but they weren't tears of fear or helplessness. They were tears of understanding. I had seen the price of silence, and now I was about to witness the higher, bloodier price of action, and I was ready. I nodded into my father's shoulder, unable to speak, but he understood. He gave my back a soft pat, then let go. "Go home, sleep, act like nothing is wrong. I still have work to do." I turned and walked into the darkness. This time the dark wasn't scary. It was a curtain of protection. I clutched the key in my palm, holding on to a whole future. The night of the new moon came. The sky was starless. A thick ink-black darkness covered the plantation. The air was still and heavy, only the sound of crickets chirping endlessly, like an invisible countdown. I didn't sleep. I lay on my mat, eyes wide open, ears straining for the smallest sound. The key was warm in my clenched fist. Then I heard footsteps. Many footsteps. Not the clomp of soldiers' boots. It was the sound of bare feet, soft but countless. They passed by my house, silent shadows slipping past the wall cracks. I sat bolt upright, pressing my eye to the crack. In the dim, murky dark, I saw them. The men. People I knew. Uncle Bemba, who'd been beaten down. The neighbor missing a leg. Old Malik. He was there too, his face grim. In his hand, not a gun, but a long rubber tapping knife, and its blade catching a sliver of moonlight. There were thin women, too, holding small axes, hoes, or just heavy pieces of wood. They didn't speak. They communicated only with looks, with nods. They were shadows of a fury that had ripened, of a shame fermented into a simmering hatred. They moved toward the soldier's post, melting into the night, armed with the only weapons they had, their own tools of labor, and a will of steel forged in blood and tears. My father was somewhere in that crowd, a one-handed soldier with a sharpened stick, leading the silent march into the heart of hell. I sat back down, my palms sweating but my heart beating a steady, sure rhythm. I waited for the signal, for my mission to begin. The darkness held everything, waiting for the moment to explode. A whistle blew, a piercing, mournful sound, tearing through the quiet night. It wasn't the soldier's signal. It was a whistle made from a buffalo horn, the sound of my village, of the hunters. As soon as it stopped, the world exploded. From the direction of the soldier's post came horrible screams. Not battle cries, but the panicked shouts of men attacked in their sleep. The sound of wood shattering windows. The clash of metal and flesh. Then gunfire. Scattered at first, panicked, then quickly becoming a steady crackle. But strangely, most of those gunshots weren't coming from inside the post. They came from outside, from the bushes, from behind the rubber trees. They had guns. A few, but enough to cause chaos. I bolted from the house, the key clenched in my hand. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and something coppery. Blood. In the flickering flames starting to rise from the post, I saw scenes from a nightmare. A white soldier, wearing only shorts, ran out of the barracks in a panic, a pistol in his hand. From the shadows, a figure lunged. It was old Malik. The tapping knife in his hand flashed, then plunged into the soldier's side. The soldier howled, his gun dropping. Old Malik didn't stop. He lifted the knife and brought it down, over and over mechanically, with years of pent-up fury. In another corner, two women were struggling with a large black soldier. He'd dropped his rifle. One woman wrapped her arms around his legs, the other hit his back and head with a small hoe. The dull thuds were steady, horrible. And then I saw my father. He wasn't in the main fight. He was near the big shed, the ammo shed. A soldier, probably trying to run there for more bullets, had blocked his way. This soldier was young, strong, with both hands. He held an iron rod. My father stood there, empty-handed. No, not quite. In his left hand, he held something short and dark, maybe a small piece of wood. The soldier growled and swung the rod. My father didn't dodge. He stepped in. The blow grazed his shoulder. I heard a faint cracking sound. But my father was now inside the soldier's reach. His left hand shot up, the dark object in his hand. I could see clearly now. It was an iron wrench. Maybe picked up somewhere, slammed into the soldier's temple. The soldier staggered. My father, with incredible strength, used his whole body and his stump, which he pinned against the soldier, to wrestle him to the ground. They rolled in the dirt. My father was on top. He raised the wrench and brought it down, once, twice. Then he stopped. His hand reached out and took the rifle from the unconscious soldier. He got up, panting, his left shoulder hanging strangely. He turned, looking toward the ammo shed, his eyes blazing with a crazy determination in the firelight. I couldn't watch anymore. My mission. I ran, bare feet on the hard-packed ground, weaving around the fighting, avoiding struggling shadows. The gunfire grew more intense. I heard shouts in Belgian, full of panic. "Hold the ammo shed! Hold it!" The west storage shed, a low, dark wooden building. No guards. They'd probably been called to fight. I ran to it, my hands shaking as I shoved the key into the lock. Click. The big iron bolt slid open. I pushed the door. A foul, stifling smell rushed out. In the dark, dozens of wide, terrified eyes looked at me. Women. Children. They were huddled in the corner on the damp floor. Some were crying softly. "Out! Get out now!" I screamed, my voice shrill with tension. "Run to the forest! Follow me!" They stared, confused. An older woman recognized me. "Kofi? Joseph's son?" "Yes, quick! My father said so." The name Joseph worked. They began to stir, clumsily getting up. Children were picked up. I urged them on, pushing the ones nearest the door. "Run to the forest! Look for the white cloth strips on the trees!" They poured out, a stream of panicked people, stumbling as they ran. I stood at the door, pushing each one out, my eyes still darting toward the post. The fire was bigger now. A huge explosion. Boom! Shook the ground. The ammo shed? A brilliant orange fireball rose from that direction, lighting up a corner of the sky, throwing the running, fighting, falling figures into sharp silhouette. "Faster, faster!" I yelled. The last person, a young girl carrying a baby, ran out the door. I turned and ran after them, taking the lead. We plunged into the forest edge. The white cloth strips, torn from shirts, dangled from low branches, glowing in the firelight from behind. I pointed, shouting, "Follow that! Run straight!" We ran. Ragged breaths, crying, the sound of leaves tearing underfoot. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, leading them deeper, farther, down the path my father had prepared. The gunfire, the shouts, gradually faded, swallowed by the rustling forest. Then I heard running water, the gully, the stream. We reached it, a flat area by the stream sheltered by big trees. Everyone collapsed, gasping, holding on to each other. Children sobbed. The older woman hugged me. "Thank you, boy. Thank you." But I didn't hear her. I stepped to the edge of the stream and looked back toward where we'd come from. The whole sky over the plantation was now blazing red. Not just a small fire, it was a pillar of fire, churning, rising high into the black sky, swallowing the wooden buildings. The ammo shed had blown, and maybe the fuel shed too. In that hellish firelight, far away, I could see the shapes of ruined buildings. And on a pile of rubble, burnt wood, stood the figure of a man. A lone figure standing unsteadily. One arm was raised, as if holding something long, a rifle. The other arm was just a short stump, hanging by his side. It was Father. My heart shattered. He was alive. He was standing there amid the ruins of the enemy. Then, from a hidden corner in the rubble, another figure sprang up. A soldier, the survivor. He raised something that flashed, a pistol. My father turned, but too slowly. A small flash from the gun barrel, a small bang, almost drowned by the roar of the fire. The figure on the rubble jerked violently. The arm holding the rifle went slack. Then the whole person, slowly, very slowly, as if in a horrible dream, tilted sideways and fell from the pile of rubble, disappearing into the sea of fire and swirling black smoke below. I stood there, my limbs weak. No. A silent scream rose in my throat. My eyes were glued to the spot where that figure had vanished, to the pillar of fire consuming everything. I knew it. That was Father. The first light of the new day didn't chase away the darkness. It only revealed what the dark had hidden. The soldier's post was gone, just a charred, jumbled pile of rubble, still smoking. The stench of burnt wood, cloth, and something sweeter, heavier, clung to the air, to our clothes. The smell of victory, if it had a smell, was this, the smell of destruction. Survivors trickled back from the forest, from hiding places. They stepped out quietly, no one cheering. They stood around the pile of ashes, faces smudged with soot, eyes red from lack of sleep, and something deeper than sadness. Some had died, many, not just soldiers. Old Malik lay right in front of the barracks door, 3 deep stab wounds in his chest, but his hand still gripping his tapping knife, its blade bent and broken. Uncle Bemba, who'd once collapsed from exhaustion, now lay by a tree root, a bullet that through his chest, and many more. The men and women I saw every day, now lying still in the strange poses death leaves behind. Then I found my father. I didn't want to look, but my feet carried me as if an invisible string pulled me toward the pile of bricks and burnt wood where I'd seen him fall. He was under a charred roof plank, almost buried. Me and a few other men lifted the plank away. My father lay on his side, the back of his shirt burnt away in a large patch, showing blackened, blistered skin. A small, neat wound right in the middle of his chest, the pistol shot. But his face, it wasn't twisted in pain or fear. On the contrary. Under the soot and ash, his face looked peaceful. His eyes were closed, the wrinkles around them smoothed out. His lips were slightly closed, almost smiling a very faint, very private smile that only he understood. And in his left hand, his fingers were curled, still unclutching the wooden and steel rifle he had won. Clutching it so tight we had to use force to pry it loose. He had died as a soldier, as a warrior, not as a victim. I knelt beside my father. I didn't cry. My tears seemed to have dried up last night, or burned away in the fire. I just put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the cold that had replaced his warmth. The last time I touched him was that warm hug before the attack. Now it was just numbness. We buried the dead. No coffins. We used cloth, mats, the least damaged planks to wrap them. We dug shallow graves in the soil where they'd once been forced to work. A long line of fresh mounds of earth, next to the silent rows of rubber trees. There was no loud crying, just stifled sobs, silent tears falling to the ground. Widows held orphaned children, their eyes empty, staring into space. Children like me stood by their parents' graves, not understanding how the world could change so fast, so cruelly. I stood before my father's grave, a simple mound marked with a small stone. The huge empty sap basket, the symbol of his years of slavery and pain, was placed on its side next to the grave. It would never have to be carried again. Victory? If this was victory, it smelled of freshly dug damp earth, dried blood, and a vast emptiness. We had driven out the rulers, destroyed the post. But the price, those graves said it all. Each grave was a piece of the village, a piece of us, buried forever. As the sun rose higher, a group went into the rubble of the command building, searching for anything useful. Medicine, food, cloth. I went with them. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a clue, something to understand more about the ones who'd caused all this. In a scorched little room, we found a metal cabinet, its door blown open. Inside, stacks of papers were burnt at the edges, covered in ash. Reports. In Belgian. There were columns of numbers. SAP output, quotas, number of workers, number disciplined. On one page, I saw a calculation table with the words efficiency coefficient and numbers carefully crossed out. This same cold language had sentenced my father. It lay there, lifeless, even as the men who wrote it were dead or fled. Then, in the bottom drawer, I found it. A small black-painted wooden box with a lock. A man used an axe to smash the lock. Inside, on faded red velvet, lay a knife. Not a normal tapping knife. It was bigger, heavier. The blade was wide, straight, of polished steel even though neglected, the wooden handle carved with fancy patterns. A ceremonial-looking knife. A display piece. But near the handle, on the blade, was a faint stain, a dark brown something long since eaten into the steel. Everyone went silent. They looked at the knife, then at each other. No one spoke, but everyone understood. This could be the thing that had cut off so many arms, so many lives, the thing the officers used for discipline, then stored away like a trophy, a souvenir. A man reached for it to throw it into the still smoldering fire. Wait. My voice rang out, cold, not the voice of a 12-year-old boy. They all turned to look at me. I stepped forward. I looked at the knife. Then I held out my hand. Give it to me. The man hesitated, looking at me, at the knife with disgust. Kofi, this is a devil's thing. I know, I interrupted, my voice still flat. That's why. I held my hand out, firm. Reluctantly, he handed me the knife. The knife was heavier than I expected, ice cold. I gripped the wooden handle, feeling the sharp carvings under my palm. I looked down at the polished blade where that brown stain looked like an unfading blemish. I didn't throw it away. I didn't hide it either. I held it tight. The cold of the metal traveled from my palm, up my arm, straight into my heart, freezing all the churning emotions inside. This was no longer their weapon. Now it was proof. A memory of steel. A bloody inheritance left by my father, old Malik, and all those lying under the mounds of earth. And I would keep it. I didn't leave. Many people did. To other plantations for work. To distant towns hoping for a new life. But I stayed. This village, now full of empty spaces. Houses empty because their owners were dead. Orphaned children playing with distant fear in their eyes. Widows working harder than ever. As if to forget, to fill the emptiness. And the disabled men. They were still here. Missing arms, limping legs. They no longer had to carry heavy sap baskets. But they still worked. Planting cassava, weaving, repairing roofs damaged in the chaos. They became the backbone of the village, in a different way. I grew up with them. I didn't become a teacher or a leader. I just stayed, worked, listened, and remembered. I had a notebook, a small book with a rough leather cover, pages made from scraps of paper found in the post. In it, I wrote down everything. Names of the dead, Joseph, Malik, Bemba, Nala. She didn't survive that night. Wounds from the chaos took her and the baby in her belly. Dozens more. Stories from the elders about the old days, before the white men came, before the rubber trees. Numbers I'd found in the burnt papers. A quota of 4 kilon per person per month. A coefficient of 1.5 for the lazy. Lists of the disciplined, with red X's next to their names. And sayings. My father's words, remember to live, and don't let anyone go through what I did. The girl Alara's whisper in the prison. They're afraid of what we will remember. That notebook grew thick over the years. It was heavy in my pocket like a stone, but I didn't get rid of it. And I kept one other thing, the knife. It wasn't shiny anymore. The steel blade was covered in brown rust, looking old and harmless. But I knew what it was. I kept it in a wooden box under the floor of my house, next to my father's empty sap basket, many years later. I was a man now. My face had wrinkles like the gashes on an old rubber tree. One afternoon, as the sun began to slant, I called the village children to me. The children born after the night of chaos, children of the survivors. Today I'll take you somewhere, I said, to see something. We walked, deep into the forest behind the village, a place few went. We came to a clearing. In the middle stood a very old rubber tree. It wasn't like the others. Its trunk was twice as thick, covered in layer upon layer of scars. Old, deep gashes in V-shapes, Y-shapes, crisscrossing. Some scars had healed, swollen into strange knots. Others still oozed a little white sap, like the tree's frozen tears. At the base of the tree was a large, flat stone, like a natural table. Sit here, I told the children. They sat around the stone, eyes wide with curiosity. I put down my old backpack. From it, I took out two things. First, the rusted knife. I placed it on the stone, solemnly. The children looked at it, no fear in their eyes. To them, it was just a broken old knife. This is a knife, I said, my voice low and slow, but not for cutting fruit or meat. People used it to cut off hands, to cut off feet. Like Akim's grandfather here, I pointed to a boy, or Cece's father over there. A little girl flinched. They cut, because her father didn't have enough sap. I took out the second thing, the leather-bound notebook. I opened it, turning the yellowed pages. And these are the names, the numbers, the stories. I pointed to a page. This is Joseph's name, my father. He had his hand cut off right in our yard for being short 15 kilos of sap, because 50 trees in his plot died, but they still counted them in the quota. I turned another page. This is Nala. She was forced to kneel in the sun for spilling sap when she was pregnant. I looked up at their young faces, now showing shock and pain. You see, this is our real history, not in their pretty books, the ones about civilizing or developing. I pointed to the scarred tree, the knife, the notebook. Our history is here, in the scars on the tree, in the rust on the knife, in these small words. It was written with tree sap, with blood, and with memory. I stood up, picked up the small model sap basket I'd brought, and placed it next to the knife. Your grandfathers, your fathers, had their hands cut off, were beaten, were killed for this, for these white drops of sap. And then they died. I pointed toward the village graveyard in the distance, because they refused to bow down anymore, because they wanted you to live a different life. I looked at each child. You can forget many things, forget a game, forget a song, but never ever forget this pain. Forget this cruelty, because to forget the pain is to betray the arms that were lost. It is to make those deaths meaningless. Silence fell. The wind rustling through the tree's scars sounded like an echoing whisper. A boy, the son of a woman widowed that night, raised his hand. His eyes were clear, but with a real fear in them. Uncle Kofi. So now, are we still afraid? I looked at the boy. Then I looked far away, where the endless rows of rubber trees stood under the fading sunset. The red of the setting sun looked like the color of the fire long ago, but softer, sadder. I turned back and gently put my hand on the boy's shoulder. Yes? I said, my voice honest, hiding nothing. We are still afraid that one day that cruelty will come back in another form, afraid that forgetting will erase everything. I took a deep breath, the familiar smell of forest earth and tree sap filling my lungs. But we must live, be afraid and still live. And live in a way that makes those deaths, that suffering, not meaningless. Live to remember. Live to tell the story. And live to make sure that no child of your children ever has to ask that question again. Are we still afraid? I raised my hand to block the last ray of sunlight slanting into my eyes. My shadow fell long across the ground, stretching past the stone, reaching the foot of the scarred tree. That shadow was no longer the shadow of a boy cowering behind a door, watching his father be punished. Nor was it the shadow of a trembling teenager in a prison cell. It was the shadow of a man carrying on his back an entire bloody memory, the names, the numbers, and the weight of a promise to the past. And he stood tall,